When you're young, you assume that people show you who they are. You take words as truth, gestures as sincerity, and closeness as loyalty. But the older you grow, and especially once you cross into your 30s, you begin to understand something far more unsettling and far more accurate. Most people wear masks, and they will continue wearing them until life applies enough pressure to make the mask crack. In your early years, you meet people at their most curated. They present the version of themselves they wish they were. They present the personality that wins social approval, maintains harmony, attracts affection, or hides insecurity. This facade is not always malicious. Sometimes it's simply the shield people construct to protect themselves from rejection or judgment. But whether intentional or unconscious, the mask still conceals their real motives, weaknesses, desires, and fears. As long as life is comfortable, predictable, and evenly paced, the mask stays firmly in place. People can afford to be agreeable, generous, and patient. They have the time and emotional bandwidth to maintain a persona. But life doesn't stay predictable forever. Responsibilities increase. Pressure builds, careers become competitive, relationships demand effort, dreams clash with reality, and when stress rises, the mask weakens. People don't have the mental energy to sustain illusions anymore. It is under this pressure, the kind adulthood guarantees, that their true nature slips through. The mask falls differently for everyone. For some, it comes off in moments of ambition. You begin to see who someone really is when there's something to gain: opportunity, status, admiration, or advantage. Suddenly, the colleague who always seemed supportive begins undermining you. The friend who cheered for you starts competing with you. The partner who promised commitment becomes distant when the relationship requires effort. Ambition strips away politeness and exposes priorities. For others, the mask drops when loss or hardship strikes. A person who once appeared loyal becomes scarce when you're no longer useful. Someone who praised your confidence resents it once they feel insecure. People often reveal their authentic selves not through their kindness, but through their reactions to discomfort, jealousy, fear, disappointment, or vulnerability. Hardship exposes character far more accurately than success ever does. The most revealing moments, however, occur when someone no longer needs anything from you. When the benefit of staying connected disappears, their mask has no purpose. You discover that affection was a strategy, kindness was conditional, and presence was transactional. What you assumed was loyalty was only convenience. This is the point where many people feel betrayed, but it is not betrayal, it is revelation. The mask simply fell off because the motive behind wearing it expired. After 30, you become sensitive to these shifts because you've witnessed them enough times to recognize the patterns. You stop judging people by their charm or eloquence. Instead, you observe their behavior under pressure, their actions when no one is watching, and their responses when life becomes inconvenient. You learn to study their patterns rather than their promises. You begin to identify the subtle signs of a mask: overly enthusiastic compliments, exaggerated empathy, unrealistic positivity, or sudden intimacy. Not because you've become cynical, but because experience has refined your perception. You also start to see your own masks more clearly. The version of yourself you constructed to fit in, please others, or avoid conflict begins to suffocate you. You realize you no longer have the energy to maintain it. You understand that authenticity is not only liberating, it is efficient. It saves you from wasted efforts, misplaced trust, and unnecessary connections. As you drop your own mask, you become even better at noticing the masks of others. The truth becomes impossible to deny. Most people only reveal their genuine selves when they either want something or when they have nothing left to gain. Every interaction we have is shaped by unspoken motives, some harmless, some self-serving, some predatory. The mask is simply the tool people use to navigate these motives without exposing their intentions. As you age, you stop expecting transparency from others. You stop assuming someone's smile reflects goodwill or that their agreement reflects respect. Instead, you learn to read between the lines. You discover how much people hide behind politeness. You learn that silence, hesitation, tone, and timing reveal far more than words ever could. And slowly, you master the art of seeing the person behind the performance. Crossing into your 30s is not about gaining years, it is about gaining vision. It is the point in life where illusions dissolve and reality becomes clearer, sharper, and far more honest. The masks people wear aren't always malicious, but they are always informative once you learn how to see through them. In your youth, trust feels abundant. You give it freely, assuming that most people mean well, speak honestly, and act with integrity. You believe that loyalty is natural, that friendships last forever, and that the people around you share your values. But with time, and especially once you cross the threshold of 30, you begin to see trust for what it truly is: a form of currency, one of the most valuable and most easily exploited resources you possess. It is something you must spend deliberately, cautiously, and with full awareness of the motives of others. Trust becomes precious not because you become fearful, but because you become observant. You begin to notice how often people say what they must to get what they want. You witness how words can be used as tools, how empathy can be performed, and how promises can be offered as a way to disarm your defenses. You see the difference between genuine intention and strategic politeness. You learn to evaluate not what people claim, but what their patterns reveal. This shift does not happen suddenly. It develops through accumulated experiences. The friend who vanished when life got difficult, the partner who claimed commitment but cracked under responsibility, the colleague who smiled in your face while plotting behind your back. Each of these moments leaves a small incision on your perception. With each incision, your understanding deepens. You do not become bitter, you become sharper. You start to realize that trust is not something to give away by default. It must be earned, demonstrated, and maintained. Once you reach this stage of awareness, trust transforms from an emotion into an assessment. You stop trusting people because you want to, and start trusting them because they have proven themselves through consistent action over time. You become aware that sincerity reveals itself in patterns, not in moments. Anyone can show kindness once. Anyone can act loyal when everything is easy. But true character is revealed through repetition, inconvenience, and challenge. You begin to recognize that people who show up only when it suits them are not trustworthy. They are opportunistic. And opportunistic people are scholars of convenience, not loyalty. You also begin to understand the hidden economy of trust. People trade on it. They borrow it without intention to repay. They use it to gain emotional access, social advantage, or professional leverage. They learn your weaknesses through it. They learn where your guard is down. This is why misplaced trust becomes dangerous. It gives others the tools to manipulate you, or at the very least, to prioritize their interests at your expense. The moments where you feel most betrayed are often the moments where you realize you trusted someone who simply understood how to appear trustworthy. This is when you start evaluating trust the same way you evaluate risk. You assess who has proven their reliability. You observe how people behave when you say no. You notice how they respond when you need something instead of offering something. You pay attention to whether their support is consistent or conditional. You begin to see patterns that were invisible in your youth. You realize that loyalty is not declared. It is demonstrated through actions that align with words even when circumstances shift. Trust becomes less emotional and more strategic, not manipulative but intelligent. You begin to ask yourself, what is this person's motive? What benefits them in this dynamic? What role do I play in their life? What do their past actions reveal about their future behavior? These questions do not make you paranoid, they make you realistic. They protect your peace, your energy, and your inner stability. As you grow older, you also become aware of how your own trust has been shaped by your past. You learn that certain forms of trust were never trust at all. They were naivety disguised as openness. You start to forgive yourself for the times you trusted too quickly, because those experiences taught you how to trust wisely. With age, trust becomes something you extend only after observing someone's intentions long enough to see through the fog of charm, convenience, or emotional appeal. You also begin to practice restraint. You stop sharing your vulnerabilities with people who haven't earned the right to hear them. You stop revealing your plans to those who might undermine them. You stop giving others access to the inner parts of you, simply because they seem kind or attentive. You learn that trust without discernment is not generosity, it is exposure. And in adulthood, exposure can be costly. Eventually, you reach a point where your circle becomes smaller, not because you fear people, but because you value genuine connection over superficial interaction. You no longer trust based on proximity, familiarity, or history. You trust based on consistency, integrity, and proven reliability. Trust becomes intentional, selective, and aligned with your well-being rather than your desire to be liked or understood. When you are young, you tend to approach relationships, personal, social, or professional, with a sense of idealism. You assume that people act fairly, that effort naturally earns recognition, that honesty leads to respect, and that good intentions create good outcomes. you believe people respond to logic, sincerity, and cooperation. But as you mature, particularly once you reach your 30s, you begin to recognize the deeper mechanics that govern human behavior. You start to understand that fairness is not the driving force of the world. Power is. And the moment this realization sinks in, your entire view of interaction begins to shift. Idealism fades not because you lose hope in people, but because you develop clarity. You witness situations where the most talented person is overshadowed by the most connected one, where integrity is outmaneuvered by influence, where truth is drowned out by confidence, and where the quiet worker is forgotten while the loud one is rewarded. Slowly, you begin to understand that life is not structured around merit, it is structured around leverage. And those who understand leverage navigate the world far more effectively than those who rely solely on moral expectation. In your early years, you may have believed that being the bigger person always pays off, that being kind automatically earns reciprocity, and that being reasonable leads to resolution. Yet adulthood teaches a different lesson. People respond, not to what is right, but to what they feel compelled to respect. Respect itself is not rooted in emotion, it is rooted in the perception of strength. This strength can be intellectual, social, emotional, or strategic, but no matter the form, it shifts the dynamic of every interaction around you. By your 30s, you begin to see that arguments are rarely won by facts, they are won by composure. Conflicts are not resolved by demonstrating your pain, but by demonstrating your boundaries. Influence is not gained by shouting the loudest, but by speaking the least while still being heard. This is when you start to understand that power is not overt, it is subtle. Often, the person who appears quiet holds more authority than the person who makes the most noise. The ability to walk away often has more impact than the desire to win. You start realizing that silence can be more effective than confrontation. When you stop reacting emotionally, people lose their ability to provoke you. When you refuse to argue with those who thrive on chaos, you deprive them of the fuel they need to manipulate the situation. When you choose not to justify yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, their power dissolves. Silence is not passivity, it is strategy. It communicates that your value is not up for debate. Distance becomes another form of power. You begin to understand that removing your presence is a stronger statement than any speech you could deliver. People feel the impact of absence far more deeply than the weight of words. Distance forces others to confront their behavior, their assumptions, and their dependence on your energy. It also protects your peace, which becomes one of the most valuable assets you possess as you age. Boundaries evolve from being uncomfortable to being essential. When you were younger, you may have felt guilty for saying no, for protecting your time, for choosing yourself over others. But with maturity, you recognize that boundaries are not walls, they are filters. They allow in what nourishes you and block what drains you. And once you put boundaries in place, you begin to notice how quickly people adjust or expose their true motives. Those who value you will respect them. Those who valued your compliance more than your presence will resist them. This resistance is not a sign of your selfishness, it is a sign of their entitlement. As power dynamics become clearer to you, you stop giving weight to surface-level behavior. You begin to analyze intention, context, and consequence. You observe how people treat you when they cannot benefit from you. You pay attention to how they behave when you disagree, when you choose yourself, or when you stop accommodating their needs. These moments reveal far more about character than any display of friendliness or charm. You start to understand that influence is not about controlling others, it is about controlling yourself. The person who maintains emotional composure holds the advantage. The person who is less reactive holds authority. The person who does not seek validation operates from internal strength, and the person who can detach from outcomes commands respect because they are not controlled by fear or desire. In your 30s, idealism does not die, it transforms. You stop expecting the world to operate on fairness and start operating based on reality. You learn to navigate relationships not by hoping for the best, but by understanding the structures and incentives that shape people's choices. You recognize that the world does not reward purity of intention. It rewards clarity of strategy, and you begin to move with a deliberate, grounded awareness that allows you to protect your value, preserve your peace, and command the respect you once tried to earn through effort alone. Reaching your 30s isn't merely an age milestone, it's the point where the fog finally lifts. You begin to see the world not as you hoped it would be, but as it actually is. You learn that people wear masks until pressure exposes them, That trust is not a gift, but a calculated investment. And that power, not idealism, dictates how relationships truly operate. This understanding doesn't harden you, it refines you. It sharpens your instincts, strengthens your boundaries, and elevates your discernment. You stop giving unearned access to your time, your energy, and your loyalty. You no longer chase approval or validation because you recognize that clarity and self-respect are far more valuable than the illusion of harmony. The world doesn't become darker as you age. It becomes clearer. And with that clarity comes the ability to navigate people with confidence, strategy, and emotional precision. You stop living on the surface of things and start reading the deeper currents, the motives, the incentives, the patterns. You lose illusions, but you gain intelligence. You shed naive expectations, but you gain control. You stop hoping people will be who you imagined, and you start responding to who they truly are. And that is the moment adulthood stops being confusing and starts becoming powerful.